The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. This is our first special episode of 2026, and I want to share an incredible book, one that inspired a song by The Doors, and it's not Break On Through. Our author, Sherri Kukla, has a new book that is available for purchase starting January 14th, 2026, Riders on the Storm. So this episode is really timely. Riders on the Storm should be at the top of your to-read list for the year. Sherri is new to the true crime genre, but has been a long-time fan of mysteries. She has previously published a series of faith-based mysteries for middle school readers, which is so commendable, as well as the Dry Brook mystery series for adults. Now she is stepping into true crime with Riders on the Storm, based on a true story. Sherri takes us back to mid-20th century America, 75 years ago, if you can believe it, when Harry Truman was in the White House and rock and roll was just beginning. There is no Elvis Presley yet. Riders on the Storm follows a rage-filled young man as he embarks on a near month-long crime spree that will shake the very fabric of post-World War II society to its core. And we'll be talking all about this. So a bit about Sherri. She married her husband, Steve, as a teenager over 50 years ago. Their home has always been filled with lively joy as they raised 4 children and fostered a dozen others. Steve and Sherri also founded S&S Off-Road Magazine, which explores vehicle-based adventures, including 4x4s, off-roading, ATVs, overlanding, and outdoor lifestyles. Now they have 3 grandchildren and live in a desert community in Southern California. Today, Sherri joins us to discuss the national crime of 1951, the case of William E. Cook, the Cockeyed Killer, a case that I do not recall hearing about before. So, Sherri Kukla, welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill. I'm so excited to talk to you about the new book, Riders on the Storm. I'm excited to talk because I have listened to some of your other podcasts, and you're so familiar with all of the true crime, and you know so much about it, and you're so enthusiastic about it. It's just like just having a conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That means a lot to me. Sherri, I had never heard of this case, and I'm a little out there in true crime, but this one I had not heard of. I know in the book you mentioned your grandson Wyatt, but yes. How did you get onto this story?
Well, Wyatt is a musician. He was 12 at the time he gave me the idea. He's 13 now. He plays all different instruments, and when he comes over, we live a couple hours away from each other. When he comes over to visit, a lot of times in the evening, my husband and I and our grandson will sit around and watch YouTube videos of oldies rock musicians and songs and things. And I love research. And so I'm always researching, well, I wonder what the lyrics of this song mean, or when we're watching old movies at night, oh, I wonder whatever became of that actor. And I'm constantly researching, and just it interests me delving into this. So we were listening to The Doors' 1971 hit, Riders on the Storm, which was the last hit performed before Jim Morrison died a few months later. But I had looked that up a few months earlier, and it's about this crime. And I had never heard about this crime. And so I read a little bit more about it. I did some research and watched some there was some, YouTube videos about it. And so the night we were listening to it with Wyatt, it was actually a really good video it was an interview with the keyboardist. He was still alive at the time. This was like 12 years ago. And he was telling how they came to write the song. I don't think he mentioned the history of the song, but he was talking about, he has amazing keyboards that he plays in that song. And my grandson learned how to play that while I was writing the book. And when he would come visit, he would sit and he would be playing that while I'm working on the book. But anyway, I told my grandson, that's based on a true story. And I told him about it. And he was really listening. And he said, "Oh, Grandma, you should write a book about that." And I didn't really take him seriously because I haven't written true crime. I've done adult and children fiction mystery. And my adult is murder mysteries. It's faith-based. It doesn't have a lot of really nitty-gritty. You don't get into blood and gore, but there is a murder in each one of those books. But I had never thought about doing true crime. So the next day, Wyatt had gone home. I had a dentist appointment, and my husband went along with me, and he sat out in the car. He wondered, what could the dentist have to do with this book? I go in to my dentist appointment. I get the bad news that I'm going to have a root canal. I come out to the car and I tell my husband, I go, I'm going to have a root canal. And he says, totally ignores what I've just said. He goes, "I've been thinking about what Wyatt says, and I think you really should write that book." He says, there's a lot of Doors fans that might be interested in knowing what the story is behind that song. And just true crime is such a popular genre that I think you should do that. And I just looked at him and I said, "Did you hear me? I have to have a root canal." So anyway, we just set that aside. We talked about the book some more. We got home. I started doing a little bit more research. And then I told him, "Okay, I might do this." I said, "But if I do, you're going to be hearing me talk about this nonstop, 24/7 over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it takes to do it." And he said that was fine. Normally, he reads my books and helps me with the editing, but he told me he would not read this one because of, the very sad things that are in it. So he encouraged me to write it, but he said he wouldn't read it. So I started working on it, and that's how I got going. I mean, every spare minute I had, I have another full-time job. We publish an off-road magazine, and that's my main job. But every spare minute I could find was spent delving into the research of this. I subscribed to Ancestry.com and newspapers.com.
Newspapers.com.
Yeah. And so it was amazing. And it's so easy to, while you're searching it, then you read about another crime. You go, "Oh, this is interesting." And then I have to tell myself, look, you only got so much time. You need to just stay on this topic. And there was so much out there. Well, I printed out the articles and then I color coded them and dated them and filed them. And that's where I really started delving into it. And then I really hit the jackpot when I was able to figure out how to get the court transcripts from the 2 different trials.
Yes.
I got probably 1,500 pages and went through them all. And so it just took off from there. That was back late April. I started it.
Wow. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I read your book and I can't help myself. You say you love research. I love research. Yeah, people probably fall asleep, reading some of the things that, you read through. But to me, it's absolutely fascinating. So I did the same thing. I was on newspapers.com. I'm reading all the stories, looking at the headlines, and it was amazing. And I'm like, how have I missed this story? Granted, it's long before I was born, but still these things, they pop up. And I had not heard the story before.
And a lot of people I've talked to haven't. And it's 75 years ago on this date, this was taking place. Also, just so the listeners know, we're talking about the story of a hitchhiking murder. This crime covered 6,000 miles and multiple victims. There was murder and kidnapping involved. And I never had heard of it either. My daughter used to watch crime shows. My granddaughter, who grew up in our home, she watched crime shows. My involvement with true crime has been through my kids and my grandkids, and I've never actually read true crime books. And so I had never heard of this and all the different ones that they were telling about. And so it could be because it was 75 years ago. And my husband and I have speculated on what prompted Jim Morrison to include this in his lyrics. And we figured out he would have been about 7 years old when it happened. And he was in Southern California. And some of the crimes took place in Southern California. They were all over the Midwest and into California as well. We just wondered if maybe he remembered hearing it in the news, or it was probably on the news because it was covered all over the United States. And maybe that just stuck in his mind and he wrote it into those lyrics. And I looked a little bit more into the lyrics of that song because he's talking about there's a killer on the road and something about, I meant to have the lyrics here with me while we were talking, but I don't have it. Something about a family and things are going to come to an end. But then he jumps into talking about his girlfriend and you need to love your man. And what Ray Manzarek, the keyboardist, said was that the song was so dark, then he wanted to kind of take it and lighten it up some. So when you're listening to it, it's just like he's got all of this darkness, but then all of a sudden we jump over to let's talk about something else in this song. But the music goes so well with with what the song's about. And I've had some of the advanced readers tell me that while they're reading the book, they could hear the song, playing in their head.
Oh, it has been stuck in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up 2:00 in the morning to use the restroom and I'm still hearing riders. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
You mentioned the part about you've got to love your man. Now, not knowing you had spoken with any member of the Doors, I was thinking that was a reflection on the killer as a child.
Oh,
That love that he didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
Because, his background is horrific.
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to take a child and create a spree killer, they checked every box.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wondered if it was like that reflection on here's this horrible darkness,
Mm-hmm.
and here's the preventative.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. And if I hadn't heard the interview with Ray, I may have agreed with that, but I don't think that's what was in Jim Morrison's mind. But, when you go back to talking about all the things that went wrong with him, he was one of many siblings. He's the only one that turned out this way. And so that's one of the things I know in one of the hearings, they were really trying to emphasize a troubled background. But I think even today, when that is tried to be used as an excuse for these horrible crimes, and the prosecutor did this in one of the hearings, a whole lot of other successful people who also started with a terrible childhood, a terrible background, but they didn't turn out that way. And it comes down to choices. And I really feel like this doesn't really have anything to do with what I wrote in the book, but my thoughts on that are we have to judge the crime for the crime itself, not what led up to it, because the person that got murdered is still dead and the family has lost. And so it was a hard book to write. I don't know that I would be ready to jump into another true crime book anytime soon, especially because with children being involved in this one. And
well, it's gut-wrenching. It really is. I was going to ask you if you were going to do another true crime book, and I understand if you're not, because even reading the number of books that I read, sometimes I call it a palate cleanse. I have to go read something. I still like mysteries, so I may even read crime stories, but I have to do something that's not real.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, something made up just to not carry that darkness. Something I say frequently too is that I sympathize with the child that Billy was living through what he did and the tragic story. But the adult, I do not sympathize with.
Mm-hmm.
He made absolute choices to kill multiple times when he
Right.
didn't have to.
Right. He didn't. And really, his crime started even as a young teen. And so he was on to this lifestyle of doing what he wanted. And he was in prison before this killing spree started, which a little tidbit of information I learned from this, and you probably know this, but I wondered why they called him a spree killer as opposed to a serial killer. And what I learned is a spree killer kills a lot of people in a short amount of time, and the serial killer, a lot of people over a long period of time. So that's why I had never heard that term, spree killer. But he was in prison before that started for crimes he committed as a teenager. He was only 17 when he went to the Missouri State Penitentiary, which now is closed, but it's a museum, I understand. And I met a man online, Harvey, who was in Missouri State Penitentiary for 29. Well, he was in prison 29 years. I don't think he was in that prison the whole time. He has a YouTube channel called Harvey Talks Prison, and he has several really good videos about the Missouri State Penitentiary. And that's how I was able to write the chapters when Billy Cook was in the penitentiary, because I watched, and one of them, he takes you on like a virtual tour of the prison, walking through it. And so when I describe like when he was in solitary, or I think they call it the dungeon, when he was in that, I saw it in a video. So I was able to describe it knowing that I saw it. And then Harvey read an advanced copy. He was one of my first people to read it. And I was so excited because he said I got the prison scenes exactly right. And
Perfect.
From a man who had been there. He was not there when Billy Cook was there. He was much younger than him. I think he was there within 5 to 10 years after that. I really appreciated his help.
Oh, absolutely. That's wonderful. I will make sure that I link Harvey on my blog so that people can find it easily and get him some attention.
And he actually murdered someone. That's why he was in prison. And he wanted me to write his story. It was kind of cute. He said, but it's a boring one because it's not like long and drawn out. And he killed a man who had been molesting his younger brother. He couldn't find anybody to listen to him, to do something about this. And if you find his YouTube episode where he talks about it, it's interesting how he did it to try to not get caught, but he did get caught, and he served 29 years. And I'm just really impressed with him because he survived prison. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't say that it's okay to do that. He acknowledges that, that's not the way to handle something, but it's a really interesting story. And I haven't totally ruled out writing about that. I'll give it some thought. And even though I said I wouldn't do any more true crime, the other day I was going through my file folders from all of the newspaper articles I had printed out for this one. And I discovered I had a file folder that said, other crimes. And I guess I did go ahead and print some out of things that looked interesting. So we'll see what comes of this.
It reminds me of the scene from Godfather 3 where Al Pacino is like, I'm almost out and they pull me back in. Yeah, true crime is compelling.
Yes. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yes.
Welcome to the genre. I think you're here to stay.
It may be. I am. I would not write about any crimes, though, that are really gory. I would not write about any true crime that involves sexual things. There's just certain things I do not want to research and get into. But these, I would have to say, yes, there was a lot of killing, but it was pretty quick. There wasn't torture. I don't think I could write about anything involving torture. I read the newspaper headlines and they talk about from back in the 50s, what a horrible, horrible crime this was. But yet I've seen other crimes, of course, this was later on, that really are horrible because of the torture and just, the different things that are involved. But I think what I find interesting in watching, especially the true crime shows, is how they solve them, how they go about and find who it was that did the crime. And I think that's just been really interesting.
Yes. Couple things while you were talking hit me. Because while I was reading the book and this spree is going on and people are being killed, they have radio. There's no cell phones, there's no electronic bulletin boards, no Amber Alerts. I mean, nothing like that even is in the remotest possibility yet. And today I'm reading this, recognizing how far technology has come and how much we take it for granted. They're still finding coins to make a phone call and things like this, where we're swiping cards and there's no you couldn't find a payphone if you wanted to.
Right.
And here this is going on. And at the same time, you were placing us in the early 50s. That post-World War II is still fresh. And we think of this as, a kinder, gentler time with this horrific murder going on. But that made it all. I'm not going to say people didn't kill people in the 1950s. Of course they did. Terrible crimes took place. But there's a contrast because the scope was different. You didn't necessarily hear about something like this every day. So talk about media. I mean, as much media as they had, newspapers are crazy publishing stories. The radio is warning people, we're looking for a person who looks like this, and trying to get the word out. And you wrote that. One of the victims, I can't say I remember exactly which one, is thinking, if only I had heard that before I picked up that hitchhiker. If
that's right.
Only. And I wound up saying, what am I doing? Putting myself in that car. What am I doing? What am I saying? How am I getting out of this? Will I get out of this? And you carry this all the way through the book. It's genius. I mean, I was in that backseat, just the phantom, watching all of this interaction. When I can do that, when I can read and engage that way, that is very good writing.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. Once we determined it was going to be done, then I had to sit and just kind of ponder, how is it going to be done? Because I knew I did not want to be in the mind of the killer. And I'm not in his mind. And the only time things start coming out about what he might have thought is in the court trials. And it's not me, the writer, being in it. It's the attorneys, the judges, the people asking questions. So I knew I wanted to be in the victims' minds. And what I like about the way I wrote it is there were 10 victims. Some died and some didn't. So that's the suspense I'm hoping that will pull the readers through the book. They don't know. Every car that picks this man up, that person may not die, but they may die. And so you're not going to know till you start reading the book and get through it. Yeah.
Yes. And that it carries all the way through. And when people die, you're grieving as the reader. When someone lives, you're trying to figure out why, because you didn't get into the head of the killer. That's kind of what I do. I try to figure out their motivation. I try to understand what he's trying to gain. And this is baffling because this guy doesn't talk. He doesn't talk to the police. He doesn't talk really to the psychiatrists. He only speaks to the defense psychiatrists. He's not really sharing. It talked a minute ago about spree killers, and the type of spree killer he's called a pseudo commando, whereas they come from a criminal background. They kind of embrace that lifestyle. That's him 100%. They'll collect guns and rifles. That's him. Good with firearms. That he wants to lash out at the world, angry. That he's geographically mobile. That his victims are random. I mean, he's textbook pseudo commando spree killer.
Oh, I hadn't heard that term. Wow.
That's what I do.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that there can be people that just fall into that category, and sadly all of the people in this book the victims were people that were nice people just trying to help him. And they were not deserving. I mean, nobody was deserving of it, but they're trying to help. And this is, yeah.
Here's a guy stranded on the side of the road. Well, I mean, today I think hitchhiking has virtually been eliminated, from the culture for good reason. But you used to live in we used to have a country where that's what people did. If you got stuck on the side of the road, we don't have a cell phone to call. You're going to try to walk to the next gas station, which could be how many miles? So people did stop and offer to help. And that went very sideways for them. Terrifying.
Yes. And one of the things that I put in the book, there's so many people that were impacted by this, way beyond the people that were kidnapped or murdered. For instance, just regular people who did not have vehicles, who relied on hitchhiking, were now no longer able to get around because it's like the whole country, the whole nation stopped picking up hitchhikers because of this.
Yeah.
So when I just reminded myself of something when I said how many people were impacted by this. I met the granddaughter of one of met her, I should say, not in person, but first on Facebook, and then we talked on the phone. Her grandfather was one of the detectives investigating this crime. And she wasn't alive when the crime happened, but at the age of 10, her mother passed away and she was raised by her grandparents. And she said to her grandpa's dying day, he never got over this crime, especially because of the children, and never forgot about it. And so that impacted her. Originally, I got in touch with her, asking her if she would read the book, and if she liked it, would she write a review? And she couldn't get past the beginning where it talks about the hard childhood.
Confronting high credit card debt can feel scary, but the good news is, if you owe $10,000 or more in credit card debt, financial relief options are now available. National Debt Relief is currently offering debt relief designed to reduce what you owe and put you on the fast track to becoming debt-free. If you qualify for debt relief, you may be able to pay back less than what you owe and save thousands of dollars. Just visit nationaldebtrelief.com. Imagine only paying one low monthly program payment you can afford and saving money as you become debt-free. National Debt Relief has already helped bring debt relief to over 550,000 U.S. consumers, earning thousands of five-star reviews and an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. You're stronger than your credit card debt. Let today be the day you start turning things around. Take the first step and visit nationaldebtrelief.com to see what debt relief you may qualify for. That's nationaldebtrelief.com.
Because she said that always bothered her grandpa, thus it bothered her too, that people wanted to excuse him because of the hard childhood. And so here, 75 years later, well, 74 at the time I was talking with her, it's still very, very real, very hurtful, to where she could not even finish reading the book. And I thanked her for her impact. What I had done was I had marked the pages in the book that applied to her grandpa so that she could look at those. So she did look at those sections, and we talked about, did I portray that accurately? And she gave me a couple of ideas of some things to change. And some things, and this was really neat, she said, I was so accurate. She wondered, how did she know that? And those were part of the things where I was having to kind of fill in to make this a full story, not with big gaps. But I'll tell you, a lot of my writing, I pray about things before I start writing. I pray about projects and how I'm going to portray something and what I'm going to say. And that's all I can attribute it to when she said, down to, and I don't want to give the details away for two reasons. I don't want to reveal what's in the book, but I want to respect. I don't want to give away who she is because it's just sad. So once I listened to her, and I don't know if it was you that asked me in some questions or someone else, what was like the hardest part of the story. That was the hardest part that came after I wrote the book, realizing Here's a woman, I think she's probably in her 50s, still hurting because of this topic, because of knowing how hard this was on her grandpa. And I think sometimes we don't realize how much this impacts the law enforcement, the investigators, the people that are searching, for the crime, the people that are trying to solving the crime, that this stays with them. And, I think he lived to be in his 70s. And he was, I don't remember my years, quite a few years he was still alive after it happened and never got over it. So once I talked with her, that really shook me up, because if I had even had a clue that this was still going to be a hard topic for her, I don't think I would have reached out to her. And I really felt awful, because I was reaching out to her wanting help promoting my book. Here's someone that's connected to a detective, and she can write a review and I can say, who she is, and I was not expecting that at all. And that's just when it made me aware that so many more people than just the victims and their families are impacted by something like this, and not just for a short time, but for years. And she wasn't even born when it happened, but she's still impacted by seeing her grandpa struggle with it.
Yes.
So,
I can appreciate that. When I do a book, your book is just coming out, it's new, but
mm-hmm.
I'll do books that are 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Do I reach out to victims to let them know it's coming? Mm-hmm. I decided not to.
Mm-hmm.
It's 20 years later. It's 10 years later. The last thing I want to do is to rip that scab off.
Right.
I don't want to do that.
Right.
So I try to really just deal with publishers and authors. Maybe I'm chicken, but it would devastate me. I understand what you're saying. It would devastate me to know that I had really upset someone, because that's the last thing on earth I want to do. Also, the scope of the people. You were saying that you were writing from the viewpoint of the victims,
mm-hmm.
but you also flash into the victims' families, what they're going through during this ordeal. And it goes on for weeks, just to demonstrate how the scope of this, it wasn't just this handful of 10 people. It was the 10 people and their parents and their children and their spouses, and then cousins, and then officers and their family members. And, this person's driving around somewhere with guns, killing people.
Mm-hmm.
The towns that are impacted. It started here in our town. Oh my heavens.
Mm-hmm.
It is incredibly well done. And your sensitivity while you're doing it, your respect for the victims, they're all treated with dignity. You're not exploiting. I've done books where it gets into the gore, and there's always a fine point of being respectful to the nature of the story, but at the same time not exploiting the person.
Right.
So you did a very nice balancing job there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. You had asked me about the separating fact from fiction.
Yes.
I told my husband I was going to do that. He said he didn't think that was necessary. And I said, oh, it's necessary. I've never seen it done anywhere. But the reason I did it is because mostly if I'm watching a movie that says based on a true story, then I'm wondering the whole way through, well, did that really happen, or did they make that part up? What happened? And then sometimes I'll even go and try to research that story, then what really happened. And then you're let down, because the part that really, spoke to you, you realize that was made up. That didn't even happen. And so I wanted to do that specifically for my book, especially because some of the parts that people might think were made up weren't. And I just wanted them to know that I would say, and I don't know what your guess is on this, but I'm guessing about 85% of it is actual fact. And I think I only had to sort of fill in the gaps on about 15% of it. The court chapters, everything the attorneys and the judges and the jurors are saying is word for word from the court transcripts. And the people who are observing, that is made up. But I did it based on what I think someone would really be thinking in that situation. And I also did that because I obviously couldn't put in 1,500 pages of court transcripts, and I need to
Right.
find ways to get through all of the boring stuff. So I did that by then we're looking at it through the view of a person who's, in the courtroom. One of the ladies, and I don't know if you remember the name, she went by Agnes Dahm, Dahm, or Aggie Dahm.
Aggie.
Okay. I know her, I guess you would say her people that came after her.
Descendants.
Yeah, her descendants. There you go. Her grandson. I looked at that last name, and it's from the Imperial County area, which I'm near. And I thought, I wonder if they're related. And so I got in touch with them. Yeah, it was either his grandma or maybe his great grandma or something. And I said, well, she has come up in this research in my book. And so I said she was called to be a juror, and she didn't get picked because she was very opinionated. He started laughing when I told him that. He goes, that sounds like my grandma Aggie. And so when she's being questioned by the attorneys to see if she's going to qualify to be a juror, and the lady just cracked me up because, and you might remember this part, the judge, he wants her to not feel the way she does, and he keeps changing the question, and she keeps saying, no, I've already made up my mind. And it's pretty funny. And so, and just talking with her grandson, I realized that really captures her personality. So I used her then, and then these parts are fictionalized. When she comes back to sit and watch the trial and we hear her thoughts and things, that's all fiction. But again, it's based on what I've learned about her personality. So, and again, that was to get through the gaps where I can't include every single word that was spoken in the trial.
I think you nailed it, because I remember chuckling out loud when the judge is, well, let me explain it again. She's like, no, I'm set. Nope, I really should be a juror. Nope, not me. It was, nope, I know what I think. Yeah, It was great. I think you absolutely nailed it. I did not realize, again, reading the story, I did not realize that at the end is where you have this is real versus, real. But when I did, I stopped and I said, oh, okay, what parts aren't real? And I really couldn't untangle that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going through and I'm like, oh, that's legit. Yeah, and I kind of went through and looked over the melding, and it's genius. It was beautifully done. And I loved that you did base it on the personalities of the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
You did your research. You really did. I mean, you left no stone unturned as far as I could tell.
Thank you. I did a lot of research, and even what the cars looked like, especially when I was working on the cover, I needed to make sure that the car was authentic from, that period. And then the picture that we were using on the cover of The Hitchhiker, my husband caught on, wait a minute, those guardrails, those are modern guardrails. So we had to go in and, do some photoshopping and things to find, well, first I had to start Googling, what did guardrails look like in the 1950s? And we had to change that. But there was a lot where you have to stop and think, what is life like, back then? What are they doing? For instance, they didn't call them motels and hotels. They called them the motor lodge. I think that's what it was, the motor lodge. And so terminology was different.
Our highway system didn't exist yet. We think of Route 95 and all. They really didn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Route 66?
Right.
If they're starting, because they were still building them in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Just the probably the 2-lane kind of roads. Yeah.
That's what I was saying with technology and stuff.
Right.
I mean, it was very simplified compared to, the transportation system we have today. So just that, we're a quarter through the 21st century.
I know. I just said that the other day. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. The other thing I would check out is the different states he's in. Like there's a scene where they pull off the road, and I had to start searching. This was in Oklahoma. what did the sides of the highway or the roadways, what did they look like? Were they dirt? Were they grass? Just so much I didn't know. Some authors have the luxury of traveling to the different places they're writing about. I don't have that opportunity, and I'm not sure I'd take it if I did because I'm not really a traveler. And so I'm thankful for the internet. I mean, without being able to research, it would have been hard. And because this book was taking place in so many different towns, then I would go on and research, well, what was the population of that town, during that time period? Because we do have a time where the one lady was buying the postcard and she's talking about how large the city is. So I checked, was it large back then? And what was the population of the city that she lived in? You just couldn't do that without, the unlimited research opportunities online.
I have to tell you, as I'm reading and the names of towns are popping up, I'm on Google Maps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, they're not taking
Yes.
our modern roads, but at least I was like, okay, all right, we're going here to here. Okay. And then I realized you can turn off highways. So I turned off highways so I could see more of the back roads, which I thought were closer to what was going on.
Yeah, I should do that because I kept Google Maps open the whole time and kept track of where they went, and because he did a lot of backtracking. He was somewhere, then he was back at, like he was in California, I think several different times, and then back in the Midwest. And it was amazing that people weren't catching on who he was. So it's almost like he was pretty bright, I think, to be able to not be detected. Another thing in the book, you didn't comment on this, but I would think you would have found this interesting. I've never done this before. I did something called the appendix, and just other little facts that I came upon sort of connected to the story, but they didn't really need to be in the story. And those things were just really interesting. For instance, the first guy that got kidnapped actually had a criminal history himself. And so of kidnapping and stealing a car. And so isn't that interesting? It kind of comes back on him.
It does. But I did love that. That was the coolest thing. Tidbits. You call them tidbits.
Mm-hmm.
A question I like to ask is, what did you have to cut out? What didn't you include? And there it was. I mean, it was like, oh, you made this so easy for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you're not the only early reader that was also researching it while you were reading, because I had another friend of mine who's one of my first readers, and she was texting me, and then I found this, and then I saw this picture of him, and she couldn't stop doing that too. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting when we do the graveside service for Billy Cook, the killer, in the end, and there's the minister that's talking, that's word for word what was really said. I found a newspaper article and it shocked me. You wouldn't see that nowadays. That's the other thing that's changed. The news coverage in the 50s was very homey, small townish. They would even print people's addresses, so-and-so's, they passed away, they lived at such and such address. But I couldn't believe it when I ran across the newspaper article of the burial, and they had word for word what the minister had said, which was mostly to kind of comfort his family members that were there, but not even very many of his family members were there. And, I actually found some people connected to him online that are still alive. And I tried reaching out to them. They didn't respond the first time. And then after I talked with the granddaughter of one of the detectives, I just thought, I'm not going to reach out to any more family members, because I just don't know. If I do another true crime, I would only do ones that are from decades ago, because I just don't think I could do one where any people connected to the victims are still alive. I mean, I'm sure there's, descendants, 2 and 3 generations that are alive still in this one. But I think that would be too hard. And like you said, on the ones that you brought up, you don't want to get in touch with them. And
I just don't want to cause any kind of pain. That's certainly not my goal. I don't want to resurrect something that's been, put to bed and is in the past. And I did the book. She married the Green River serial killer. and spoke with the author. And I'm like, should I reach out to Gary Ridgway's wife? And she's like, no, she's moved on. She doesn't want to talk about it. And that's when, I was feeling that way anyway. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm just going to do my thing.
They can't spend the whole rest of their life, having that be their identity and rehashing that. But I will say the granddaughter that I talked with, she thanked me for getting in touch with her because she said, I'm the first one that ever has. And the purpose was, did I portray him accurately? Do you have any suggestions that you want me to do differently? She said that all of the different coverage that has been out there, and she lives closer to one of the towns, where that would have covered it even more as the years went by, as the anniversaries came up. She said no one had ever reached out to them. And so she appreciated that, I was giving her an opportunity to weigh in on it. And so, and I was glad she was willing to talk to me. But like I said, I that bothered me for probably a couple of weeks of that conversation, realizing how hurtful it still was. So.
Yeah. If someone got in touch with me and said, hey, that's my descendant, that's my grandfather, that's my whoever, my first would be, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to reach out and, stir the pot, because that's not my goal. I'd rather have that conversation than, oh my God, I hadn't thought about this in years. And then someone's sobbing. Yeah.
Right.
It's like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
No.
And, you just wonder, these people, these horrible people that commit these crimes, it probably never even occurs to them, how many people, how many lives for generations to come they are impacting.
Oh, yeah. They don't even,
no, they don't care.
Beyond their own wants, desires, needs, it doesn't matter. They don't care.
Yeah.
You just kill somebody, discard them, move on. It's very hard to get into that mindset. I don't like I call it opening my third eye. When I try to get into the mind of a killer, and it's an icky place to go.
Yeah, I don't think
I don't blame you for skipping that. I really don't. It's really, it's not pleasant at all. Sherri, is there anything else you want to share about the book? What you're doing next? What's coming up? Promote thyself. Go.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be on here and talk about the Riders on the Storm. I'm anxious to see where it's going to go, how it's going to be received by the true crime readers. I hope it's received well, and we've had a lot of pre-orders, but we'll see what happens as we move through January and February and March. I think I'll be ready to go back to fiction. I have both my kids' series. It's called Moto Mysteries. It's about a couple of siblings that were adopted. They live in the desert, which is where we live. They ride motorcycles, which is what we do. And I have 5 books in that series, and I've got book 6 I've had in mind to start. Every one of the books in that series are based on an authentic desert legend. And so one of my fans, one of my early readers that reads the books and does reviews, she told me about a desert legend I hadn't heard of. And so I researched that. And so that would be book 6. And then in my adult mystery series, which actually was a spin-off of my kids series, I pulled out a couple of the adults that were in the kids series, and I started a murder mystery. And these are all faith-based fiction. And I have 3 books in that, and I've got book 4 in mind for that one. So I don't know. I may start on one of those. When I first started working on the true crime, I thought, this is a lot easier than fiction because I don't have to make things up. But then the farther I got into it, I thought, this is a lot harder because I have to stay true to the story. I can't just make things up. So it's kind of funny how in the beginning I was okay with not making things up, and then I was realizing making things up is easier. So yes. I do think I'm ready to go back to the fiction, but I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, I'm still pondering Harvey's story. He's done some recent videos, kind of some updates to his story, some things that he's just learned about connected to the person that he killed, and that might add some more interesting information to put in a book. So I'm going to give that some thought, and we'll just see where we go from there.
Perfect.
My website, if people want to read about this book or any of the other ones, is sherrikukla.com. But I also have one that's ridersonthestorm.info that will point right to the information about Riders on the Storm.
Fantastic. I will link them on my blog so that they can just click and there it'll be.
Great.
And everybody, go out and buy the book, okay? Just trust me. Just do it. It's well worth the read. It's really a work of art and it's a work of history at the same time.
That's so encouraging.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I have appreciated it. This has been such a great conversation.
Thank you. I agree. I'm glad that you invited me on.
Well, Murder Bookies, I hope you enjoyed Sherri's insights into the crime spree of Billy Cook, and one can only wonder at his motivation. But I think we all understand that his psychopathy stems from nature and nurture. I highly recommend this book because we really can see into the events as they are unfolding, and the question of what would I do if this was happening to me is very real. Riders on the Storm is available for purchase on Sherri's webpage, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and all the other bookstores out there. And the links are on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com, January 2026. And our next featured book is Incendiary, The Psychiatrist, the Mad Bomber, and the Invention of Criminal Profiling by Michael Canal. This is the case that made me take notice of criminal profiling, and finding a book that gives me all the details was like manna from heaven. This takes place even before Billy Cook's crime spree, because this is set in the 1940s, and President Franklin Roosevelt is in the White House. I'll Never Smile Again by Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra, featuring up-and-coming Frank Sinatra, and Glenn Miller's In the Mood were the top songs of the year. And a serial bomber began stalking the streets of New York City. Pausing the bombings while the U.S. was at war, the bomber resumes his dangerous obsession, bombing New York City again in 1951, as explosions erupted in Grand Central Terminal, then Radio City Music Hall, and over, maiming victims, as he is called, the greatest individual menace New York City ever faced. The race to catch him would give birth to a new science called criminal profiling, and capturing this monster would forever change the face of law enforcement. So please join me as we look back into this frightening and pivotal story of the Mad Bomber. Thank you for listening. I see you as you hear me. 2026 is going to be amazing. In April, I will be at the Hampton's Whodunit for a weekend of true crime and fun with crime fiction authors Cheryl McCullum, the gifted CSI and founder of the Cold Case Investigative Research Foundation and host of Zone 7 plus Wildlife CSI, Joseph Scott Morgan of Body Bags, and so much more. What a weekend. And I will see you at CrimeCon 2026 in Las Vegas, May 29th to May 31st, 2026. Buying a badge? Well, you can save 10% using my code, MurderShelf, all lowercase letters, one word. If you enjoy the podcast, share it with friends and family, and please leave a positive 5-star review wherever you listen. You can also join my Patreon for $2 to $4 a month to help me choose the next book I'll feature, and I am teaching my serial killer case studies class now. Oh, and don't forget Wildlife CSI in October at Lake Tobias, Pennsylvania. Check out eventbrite.com. All of my sources, photographs, articles are on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com. And if you have any questions or comments, contact me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com. Follow me on X, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I will see you next time, Murder Bookies. written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.